Yeah, good to go. Is this thing on? Yeah. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa la, amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. How's everybody doing? Alhamdulillah. So today, inshallah ta'ala, we're just going to hopefully go over a brief introduction to this surah, Surah Al-Insan. It's very exciting to get into a new surah. Every time you dive into a surah deeply, you kind of fall in love with it and feel like, you know what, maybe this is my favorite. And then, subhanAllah, once you get finished with that and jump into the next one, you're like, subhanAllah, maybe this is my favorite. And so hopefully you have that with every surah. You have this sort of deep bond and relationship, and you feel like, well, I can't really even compare one to the other because they're so unique. It's kind of like your kids, subhanAllah. You know, you can't say, I love one over the other. You love them all because they're all so unique, subhanAllah. So it's a similar sort of way. Anyhow, in terms of Surah Al-Insan, there are a number of names. Surah Al-Insan is the most popular name, but it's also called Surah Ad-Dahr, right? Because it mentions this word Ad-Dahr, meaning time, which we're going to get into inshallah later. Surah Al-Amshaj is another name. Surah Al-Abrar is another name, and Surah Hal Ata Ala Al-Insani. So these are a number of names that you can find in different books of Tafseer, but of course the two most popular are Surah Insan and Surah Al-Dahr. Now there are 31 ayat, and with regards to the time of revelation, it seems that there's a difference of opinion. Some say that it's a Mekki surah, for example, Ibn Abbas, Abu Talha, Qatada, Muqatil. They say all the ayat seem to be Mekki, predominantly, with one exception, the possibility that there's an ayah that mentions the prisoner, and so prisoners were only taken in Medina, so there's that opinion. But Ibn Mas'ud says it's a Medini surah, and some say it's partly, like from 1 to 23, it's Mekki, and then from 24 to 31, it's Medini. So this is one of those surahs that I guess you would say that it's up for debate. I was reading, Ahsan Islahi, he was saying, no, based on the content, based on the style, it's most definitely Mekki. But then again, Allah knows best. In terms of the order of revelation, it's surah number 98. And in terms of the theme, there's many different themes. This is one of the 7 surahs that begin with a question, which is very interesting, that there are these particular surahs that begin by asking a question. And when we get into the first ayah, we'll see that it's a very powerful question and it has a lot of depth to it. It's also interesting that, subhanAllah, this is a surah that talks about paradise a lot. So of course, you'll often find in the Quran that, when there are ayat warning about the fire, then it usually is followed up by ayat that are, giving you the glad tidings of paradise, or vice versa. Sometimes it starts with paradise, sometimes it goes on to warning about the fire. So you find that there's this balance in the Quran, and usually you'll say that, they're relatively similar in size. Well, in this particular surah, there seems to be a great deal of emphasis on paradise. And so it's a really beautiful surah from that perspective. And like many surahs, and this is something that I've never done a really deep dive into to see how systematic it is, but it is quite consistent. Wallah, I'm just sort of off the cuff speaking, that you'll very consistently find that in many surahs of the Quran, after everything has been said, as you're winding down to the conclusion, you'll very regularly find that there are many more commands. So there could be commands, like Allah Ta'ala could be giving commands to the believers or to the Prophet ﷺ throughout the surah here and there, but you'll usually find the highest concentration of commands at the end. And this seems to be a theme that you find in many, and I don't know the exact number of how many, but it is something quite interesting that the idea is that now that everything has been said, now that all this information has been given, now the concluding remarks are your final instructions. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. And this surah is no different. Like I said, there are 31 ayat, and you find that the commands show up. There's 2 of them in ayah number 24, 1 of them in ayah number 25, and 2 of them in ayah number 26. So right near the end, it's a concentration of commands to the Prophet ﷺ. In terms of names of Allah, you find only the names of Allah 1, 2, 3, 4 times. The name Rabb also 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 times as well. And then 2 names of Allah being Alim and Hakima right at the end. So 10 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in total. Allah ta'ala also speaks to his Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam quite a bit in the surah, especially from 19 all the way to ayat 19 to 26. Allah Ta'ala is addressing his Prophet, giving him commands and telling him, what he's going to see in paradise and so on and so forth. Now, there are no other surahs in the Quran that have 31 ayat. This is unique from that perspective. But as always, I like to begin with the ring structure. And so hopefully we'll take a look at that for today, and that will be hopefully, our introduction for today. Now, with regards to this surah, what's fascinating is that it seems that it shares its ring structure with the surah preceding it. So this is surah 76. The surah before it is 75. Who knows what surah that is? Surah Qiyamah, correct. So what's fascinating, and if you would like to grab this microphone, if you want to grab that, Jazakallah khair. So what's fascinating is if you take a look at Surah 75 and take a look at ayat, so Surah Qiyamah, ayat 1 to 15. If you don't have to go through all of it, but go through a decent amount, inshallah ta'ala. We'll take a look at what the theme is. Tafadhal. Yes, so as you can tell, Allah Ta'ala is talking about what? That you find that these ayat, Allah is swearing by Yawm al-Qiyamah, the day of resurrection, and asking, do you really think you won't be brought back? Obviously, Allah Ta'ala is capable to bring you back in every little detail, even in your fingertips. And they're asking, okay, when is this Qiyamah going to happen? And then Allah Ta'ala gives descriptions of it. And Allah talks about, obviously swearing by nafs al-lawama, the reproaching self. So there's this idea of you are responsible. You have this conscious soul that blames you, and you're going to be responsible for what you do. Do you think you could jump to Surah 76 now, Surah Insan, at the ending of it, 27 to 31, inshallah, 27 to 31. So again, you have this theme of Judgment Day. You will be resurrected. Yawman thaqila, it's on its way. And Allah Ta'ala, وَإِذَا شِئْنَا بَدَّلْنَا أَمْثَالَهُمْ تَبْدِيلًا. We could obviously recreate you. We could replace you. We could keep on coming up with a new form of you. If you die, we can bring you back. This is part of the understanding. And then, of course, then Allah Ta'ala goes on to say, this is a reminder, and you have your free will to either choose the good path or the bad path. It's up to you. So what I'm trying to say is that the beginning of Surah Qiyamah and the ending of Surah Insan both have to do with being recreated, Judgment Day, and the fact that you are going to be responsible. Your conscience is going to be speaking to you about what am I doing? I'm going to be conscious because I'm free to choose which path I want. So you find that the themes are the same. Now it's interesting if you get closer. You have now Surah Qiyamah from 16 to 19. 16 to 19, Qiyamah, please. SubhanAllah. Now, so you have, there's 5 sections here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on Surah Qiyamah, and then 5 sections of Surah Insan. The first one and the last one both had to do with what? Judgment Day and feeling that sense of guilt and knowing that you're responsible for what you're doing. Then the second one, you find that in Surah Qiyamah, Allah Ta'ala is talking about we are the ones who are going to gather this Quran and give instructions to the Prophet ﷺ about how to deal with this Quran. So the Prophet ﷺ is being given instructions about the Quran. If you could take a look at Surah Insan 23 to 26. SubhanAllah, incredible, exact same theme, which is what? We have sent down this Quran upon you, and so be patient with its rulings, and don't follow the disbelievers who are sinful, and remember Allah day and night, be consistent with the Quran, and then stand long in worshiping your Lord, prostrating to your Lord, and standing for long periods doing what? This is how you treat the Quran. So, we get a little bit closer to the center. What do you have? You have 2 sections informing the Prophet ﷺ specifically how to deal with this Quran. Does that seem coincidental? No, subhanAllah, it's very, very specific, and it's just remarkable how there's this incredible ring structure. Now let's keep on going a little bit closer to the center. From Surah Qiyamah, 20 to 30. So that's Surah Qiyamah. Now that we're getting closer, this is now the 3rd section of Surah Qiyamah, 3rd from the beginning, and you find that it's all about this shock on Judgment Day. There are going to be faces that are beaming, there are going to be faces that are gloomy, that are, so it's going to be this scene, and Allah Ta'ala is reminding you of death. So now this is about your death and Judgment Day in particular. And if we take a look at Surah Insan, this is instead of the 3rd from the front, again 3rd from the back, because that's how a ring structure works, right? From the 3rd from the back becomes what? From ayat 5 to 22. You don't have to do all of it, but just a few ayat, inshallah ta'ala, if you wish. So you see in this section, subhanAllah, Allah Ta'ala is talking about the same theme of what? On Judgment Day, but this time it's talking about the reward. So it's amazing that in the first one you have these parallel sections. One of them is saying, look, there's going to be so much fear when you're dying, and on Resurrection Day, there's either going to be reward or punishment. Either way, it's going to be shocking for you. And then in the next section, you have what? The same scene of Judgment Day, but this time it's the reward because of the good things that you have done. Now, if we could take a look at Surah Qiyamah, again, getting closer, we're almost there, getting closer to the center of the 4th section, which is ayat, so Qiyamah 31 to 36. It's about bad actions. Let's take a look at what happens and the evil actions. Tafadhal. So the disbeliever is, you can see in this case, he had not believed, he never prayed, he denied, he turned away from the truth, he was too arrogant in his pride, and subhanAllah, so woe to you on that day. Clearly a warning, and then again, that same fourth now from the back instead of from the front, you have ayah number 4 of Surah Insan, which is just one ayah. Indeed, we have prepared for the disbelievers chains and shackles and a blaze. Clearly, again, the threat. And then finally, we finally get to where they get closest together, which is the ending of Surah Qiyamah and the beginning of Surah Insan, and both of them talk about the creation. So in Surah Qiyamah, ayat 37 to 40. SubhanAllah, if it wasn't obvious enough, Allah Ta'ala specifically says, has he not been a sperm from semen emitted? So you're called literally a nutfa, which is exactly paralleled. And so it's talking about the beginning, that you used to be a nutfa, min maniyyin yumna, thumma kana alaqatan, then you were clinging clot, fakhalaqa fasawwa, then you were created and portioned, faja'ala minhu az-zawjayn adh-dhakara wal-untha, then we made from two mates, male and female. So isn't this Allah Ta'ala, the creator, able to give life to the dead? So clearly it's talking about creation. And then the very next surah, we have the beginning of Surah Insan from ayat 1 to 3. Wasn't it a time that you were nothing, and then you were created from, again, nutfa, a sperm drop, amshaj, that was a mixture, and then Allah Ta'ala says, I created you seeing, hearing and seeing, and then I guided you to the path, whether you want to be grateful or ungrateful. So simply put, if you go from 1 to 5, you have the first and the last of these two surahs is about creation, and the fact that you have a free will and your conscience is going to let you know whether you're going the right path, the wrong path, and there's going to be consequences. So that seems to be quite clear. You get closer, the second and the second to last, you get gathering the Quran, or the Quran and its instructions to the Prophet ﷺ, and both of them, the revelation of the Quran and the instructions to the Prophet ﷺ, you get closer. It's about the shock of Judgment Day and the protection on Judgment Day and the reward on Judgment Day, all about Judgment Day. Then you get closer and you have bad actions and bad consequences on both sides. And then when you get to the closest portion, subhanAllah, it's all about creation. Who speaks like this? Where do you, this is, the Prophet ﷺ, like, okay, you can't find people that write books nowadays, right? And we're talking about, I don't care how many PhDs you have, subhanAllah, the Prophet ﷺ was what? Ummi. The Prophet ﷺ was somebody who did not learn alif ba ta, he did not learn to read or to write, and yet, subhanAllah, these are the words that are being revealed to him that somehow have this structure and have this style that for years, Orientalists would criticize and say that this is all just jumbled together. It jumps from one subject to the next and we don't understand. We don't see any rhyme or reason to it. It's not like, let's say, for example, other holy books, let's say the Bible, that has a very, starting with Genesis and then moving on very sequentially or historically. It doesn't do that. And so they said this doesn't seem to be, rationally put together. And subhanAllah, they weren't looking closely enough to pay close attention and see this is just above your pay grade. It's just that simple. You're not paying close enough attention to see that this is speech beyond your comprehension. But when you pay really close attention, and maybe there are people here, I'm sure there's several of you that have memorized these two surahs and never seen this before. But when you pay close attention and you see the way Allah Ta'ala has put this all together, it is unbelievable speech, and it can only be from Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. How is it possible that we have been memorizing and reciting for 1400 years, and yet year after year you can continuously find new amazing wonders linguistically, whether it be scientifically, which is a very popular subject, or whatever the case may be. There's all these different devices and different amazing qualities and features of this Quran. So subhanAllah, this is one of them. The idea that not only is the ring structure coherent within the surah itself, but in this particular case, across two different surahs. And it's so seamless that it's not like you're sitting there belaboring. In fact, instead of it looking like a clunky or awkward, it's rather the opposite. It moves so smoothly between these two surahs, and simultaneously you find that the subjects between them reinforce one another. So it helps reinforce the content. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. So anyway, I know we took some time, Jazakallah khair, for being patient, but I thought that was a very beautiful introduction. May Allah Ta'ala make us of those who can always appreciate the depth and the wisdom of the Quran. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.